Abraham and Sarah, a journey of faith. Abram, son of Terah. He was a man of quiet strength, a herdsman, a husband, and unlike his neighbors, his heart was stirred by the whisper of a living God. One day, that whisper became a voice. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." They journeyed through Canaan, a land of valleys and hills, foreign cities and pagan altars. God said, "To your descendants I will give this land." Abram built altars to the Lord wherever he went, calling on his name. But famine struck, and they fled to Egypt. Fearing for his life because Sarai was beautiful, Abram said, "Tell them you are my sister." Sarai agreed. Pharaoh took her into his palace, but God struck Egypt with plagues. When Pharaoh learned the truth, he rebuked Abram and sent them away. Back in Canaan, Abram and Sarai grew rich in livestock, silver, and gold. But still they had no child. Years passed. One night God came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." Abram replied, "But what can you give me, since I remain childless?" God led him outside. "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be." Sarai, now well into old age, said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from bearing children. Sleep with my maidservant Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed. Hagar bore a son. Abram was 86 years old. They called him Ishmael. 13 years later, the voice of God came again. "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will greatly increase your numbers." Abram fell face down. God said, "No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. And as for Sarai, her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. She will be the mother of nations." One hot day, Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent near the oaks of Mamre. He looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. He ran to them and bowed low. "Let me bring water to wash your feet and bread to refresh you." Sarah baked bread. A young calf was prepared. They ate in the shade. Then one of the visitors said, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" "In the tent," Abraham replied. "I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Inside the tent, Sarah laughed to herself. "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" The Lord said, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Sarah denied it. "I did not laugh, but..." He said, "Yes, you did." A year later, as promised, Sarah gave birth to a son. She was 90 years old. Abraham was 100. They named him Isaac, and Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears will laugh with me." But joy was not without tension. As Isaac grew, Ishmael mocked him. Sarah saw and said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. He will never share in the inheritance with my son." Abraham was distressed, but God said, "Do not be afraid. Listen to Sarah. I will make Ishmael into a nation also, because he is your son." So Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the desert with water and bread. When they ran out, Hagar laid the boy under a bush and wept. But God heard the boy's cries. An angel called to Hagar, "Lift the boy up. I will make him into a great nation." God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. Some years later, God came to Abraham again. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Abraham's heart broke, but he obeyed. He rose early, split wood, and journeyed with Isaac. On the 3rd day, he saw the mountain. Isaac carried the wood. He asked, "Father, where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham replied, "God will provide." He built an altar. He bound Isaac and laid him upon it. He raised the knife and then, "Abraham! Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know you fear God." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket. He offered it instead. He named the place Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. Years passed. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. When she died in Hebron, Abraham mourned deeply. He purchased the cave of Machpelah as a burial site, the first piece of the promised land he would ever own. There he buried Sarah, his beloved. Later, Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac from his homeland. The servant returned with Rebekah, and Isaac loved her. Finally, Abraham died at 175 years old, full of years and faith. He was buried beside Sarah, and generations later, from the line of Abraham, a child would be born in Bethlehem, Jesus Christ, the fulfillment of the promise that all nations on earth will be blessed through you. Hagar and Ishmael, seen by God, a servant's silent pain. In the house of Abram and Sarai, wealth abounded, flocks, gold, and servants. But one thing was missing, a child. Sarai, though beautiful, was barren. Time passed and hope faded. In desperation, she turned to her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar. "Take her," Sarai said to Abram. "Let her bear you a child. Perhaps I will build a family through her." Hagar had no say. She was a slave. Her body was no longer her own. She obeyed, and soon she conceived. What began as obedience became resentment. Hagar, now pregnant, looked with pride upon her mistress, and Sarai saw it. Fury burned in Sarai's heart. "She despises me," she told Abram. "May the Lord judge between you and me." Abram replied, "She is your servant. Do with her as you see fit." And Sarai mistreated Hagar so severely that the young woman fled into the desert. At the God who sees alone, pregnant, exhausted, Hagar stumbled through the wilderness near Shur, her tears mixing with dust. But she was not alone. By a spring of water, the angel of the Lord appeared. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going?" She answered, "I'm running away from my mistress." Then came the words she never expected. "Return to your mistress and submit to her. I will increase your descendants so greatly that they will be too numerous to count." Hagar's heart pounded. "You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael. God hears, for the Lord has heard of your misery." The angel continued, "He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." Hagar's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of wonder. She gave the Lord a name, El Roi, the God who sees me. "I have now seen the one who sees me," she whispered. She returned, bearing a promise. And in time she gave birth to a son. Abram named him Ishmael. Seth, the boy and the bondwoman, 14 years passed. God fulfilled his covenant. Sarai, now called Sarah, bore a son in her old age. They named him Isaac, the child of promise. Joy filled the tents. But in the shadows stood Hagar and Ishmael. Though Abraham loved Ishmael dearly, tension grew. One day Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac. Fury stirred once more. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son," she told Abraham. "That boy will not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham's heart broke. But God spoke gently. "Do not be distressed about the boy and your servant. Listen to Sarah. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. But I will make Ishmael into a nation because he is your son." And so early the next morning, Abraham rose with sorrow. He gave Hagar a skin of water and some bread, and sent her away with Ishmael into the wilderness of Beersheba. Abandoned and heard the sun blazed. The water ran out. Hagar wandered, searching for shelter and shade. Her son, now a youth, staggered in the heat. When she could no longer bear to see him die, she laid him under a bush and walked away, about a bowshot's distance. She sat and wept. "I cannot watch the boy die," she sobbed. But God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying where he lies. Lift him up. Take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water nearby. She ran. She filled the skin and gave the boy a drink. Hope returned. A nation in the desert. God was with Ishmael as he grew. He lived in the desert of Paran, a place of wind and stone, learning the ways of the bow. He became a skilled archer, wild and free, just as the angel had said. And Hagar? She remained by his side, the mother of a nation no longer unseen. When the time came, she found a wife for Ishmael from Egypt, her homeland. The boy who was once cast out grew into a father of 12 sons, tribal leaders of their own people. Ishmael would not be forgotten. neither would Hagar. Legacy of the outcast. Though Ishmael was not the child of the covenant, he was a child of promise in his own right, because God is faithful to all who cry out. God saw the lowly servant girl. God heard the weeping of the cast-out boy. God kept his word. And long after Hagar and Ishmael passed into history, their story lived on. A story of a woman rejected by people but cherished by God. A story of a boy dismissed by men but destined by the Almighty. A story that reminds us God sees, God hears, God provides, even in the wilderness, even when the world turns away. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiration and hope-filled Bible stories.